By the time he said it, the whole floor had already gone quiet. Keyboards slowed. Conversations thinned into that strange, hovering silence that happens when people sense a storm and pretend they don't. I was finishing an email to a client when a shadow fell over my screen. The scent hit me first. Expensive cologne with too much confidence in it. Then his voice. "Fetch me coffee, darling. Extra hot. And hurry." He didn't just say it, he projected it. It rolled over the open office like an announcement. Heads lifted from monitors. A few people froze mid-step between desks. Someone near the printer coughed into a laugh and then swallowed it. I looked up. Adrian Locke, our brand new VP of Strategy, stood at the edge of my desk, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his phone like a prop. His tie was slightly loosened, like he'd already had a long day, though it was barely 9:15 a.m. "Excuse me?" I said. He tilted his head, eyes flicking past my face to the nameplate at the corner of my desk. Maya Kovar, Senior Project Manager. His smile sharpened, just enough for me to notice and for everyone else to pretend they didn't. "You heard me," he said, louder this time. "Coffee, black. You can manage that, can't you?" My fingers were still resting on the keyboard. I became intensely aware of every detail. The faint buzzing of the fluorescent lights above, the hum of the air conditioning, the way my cursor blinked patiently on the sentence I'd been writing. I could feel my team's eyes on me from a few desks away. I could have corrected him. I could have reminded him that I was the one leading the company's largest client account, that I'd been here for 6 years, that technically he should be asking me for a briefing, not caffeine. Instead, I inhaled slowly. "I'll be right back," I said. The words tasted metallic on my tongue. I stood up, smoothed my blazer out of habit, and stepped around him. As I walked toward the break room, I heard whispers pick up again. Not the loud, obvious kind, but the brittle, nervous kind people use when they're pretending not to choose sides. The coffee machine hissed and sputtered like it was angry on my behalf. I stared at the stream filling the cup, watching the black surface rise, a small, controlled volcano. My reflection in the cabinet glass looked composed. My jaw, however, was clenched so tightly I could feel a dull ache spreading toward my temples. He was new, I reminded myself. 2 weeks in. People like Adrian always had a phase where they tested boundaries. Maybe he was just careless. Maybe this was some warped attempt at banter. I didn't believe it, but I tried the thought on anyway, like a blazer that didn't quite fit. When I came back, he was leaning against my desk, scrolling through his phone, perfectly at ease in a chair he hadn't earned yet. Conversations dimmed again. "Your coffee," I said, placing the cup on the edge of my desk, not quite offering it to him. He took it without looking at me. "Knew you'd be good for something," he murmured. There it was, no misunderstanding, no context that made it better, just contempt. I didn't answer. I sat back down, pulled my chair in, and clicked send on my email. My hands had stopped shaking. That scared me more than the shaking would have. When I finally looked up again, Adrian was walking toward the glass-walled conference room, coffee in hand, radiating ownership. I exhaled slowly and turned my head. My entire team was clustered near Lena's desk, just behind mine. Their faces were wrong, too intent, too serious for a normal Tuesday morning. Lena, my senior analyst, met my eyes. Her expression was tight, almost buzzing with restrained anger. She held a folder close to her chest, fingers white around the edge. "Maya," she said quietly, "we need to talk." Something in her tone sliced clean through the humiliation, the way a sharp sound cuts through static. I pushed my chair back. "What is it?" She glanced toward the conference room, where Adrian was now laughing at something on his phone, already comfortable in his glass box. "We found something," she said. "You need to see these emails." By the time we slipped into the small project room behind the main floor, The adrenaline had faded, replaced by something heavier. The door clicked shut, muting the office noise into a distant hum. My team stood in a loose semicircle around the table. Lena, Arun, Jessa, even quiet Mateo, who rarely left his workstation unless absolutely necessary. Lena placed the folder on the table like it contained radiation. "This started as a routine audit check," she said. "We were reviewing correspondence on the Helix account to prep for Friday's milestone call. And then," she exhaled sharply, "we found this." She opened the folder. I expected a few emails, maybe 3 or 4. There were pages, dozens, all printed, all highlighted. The first line my eyes fell on wasn't even subtle. "She's competent enough to handle the grunt work while I build a narrative senior leadership will actually listen to." The word grunt pulsed on the page like a bruise. Arun spoke next, arms crossed tightly over his chest. "These were in a deleted subfolder. He tried to wipe them, but the system keeps mirrored copies for 30 days. "He didn't know that," Mateo added quietly. "Or he thought no one would check." I swallowed. My mouth felt dry, as if the air itself had thickened. Another email was worse. "I'll give her just enough rope to trip. Once I reorganize the department, we'll clean out the overpaid dead weight." Dead weight. The phrase hit harder than the darling he threw at me this morning. Jessa flipped to another page, her expression tight with controlled fury. "And this one? He sent this to his old colleague, the one at Stratagem Consulting." I skimmed it. "She presents well, but she's predictable. Easily sidelined. Leadership never sees women like her as threats anyway." I felt heat rise to my neck. Not embarrassment, something sharper, harder, metallic. Lena's voice softened. "Maya, there's more." She handed me a final printed email thread. This one was a conversation between Adrian and our CFO, written just 2 days after he started at the company. "I've already restructured the Helix pitch. It was unfocused before I stepped in. I'll take the lead on Friday. My project manager can support as needed. She's detail-oriented but lacks big-picture vision." My project manager. As if I reported to him. As if the Helix deal hadn't been my project from inception to contract to execution. My pulse throbbed in my fingertips. I sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath me. "How long has this been going on?" Arun hesitated. "Looks like he started emailing about you his first week. He's been building this story for a while." Jessa leaned forward. "He's planning to push you out, Maya, or at least push you aside, and he wants your project to make him look untouchable." The room felt smaller, the walls too close, but my mind went strangely still. I thought back to every interaction over the past 2 weeks, his casual interruptions, his habit of repeating my ideas louder as if they were his, the way he introduced himself to clients before I could speak, the little smirk whenever he called me kiddo, sweetheart, or, today, darling. This wasn't clumsiness. This was strategy. He was building a hierarchy with himself at the top and me on the ground floor holding the ladder for him. I closed the folder and looked at my team. Their faces weren't just angry, they were protective. "We told you because," Lena hesitated, "because we know who you are. You stay calm, you play fair. But this isn't fair, Maya, and we're not letting him bulldoze you." I exhaled slowly through my nose, letting the fury settle into something cooler, more deliberate. "I'm not going to react," I said. "Not yet." Jessa frowned. "Maya, if he thinks I'm rattled, he'll accelerate whatever he's planning. Let him think he's winning." Silence settled over the room, thick but steady. Mateo nodded first. "Then we'll help you track everything." Lena closed the folder. "We've got your back. All the way." I looked toward the frosted glass window where the blurred outline of the office moved like shadows behind a curtain. Adrian had walked in, swinging elbows, marking territory that wasn't his. But now I had something he didn't know I possessed. The truth. And an entire team ready to stand behind it. The regime he thought he was building had one flaw. He underestimated the woman he tried to humiliate. Adrian spent the rest of the morning parading through the office like nothing had happened. From my desk, I watched him through the glass of his new corner workspace. He stood too close to people when he talked, hands on their chairbacks, leaning in as if he already owned their time, their nerves, their futures. Twice, he gestured in my direction while talking to someone from finance. Both times, they looked over at me quickly, then away. The humiliation from earlier clung like a film on my skin, but underneath it, something colder had settled. Not panic, not yet, just awareness. At 11, a calendar invite popped up on my screen. Helix Alignment, VP Strategy plus PM. Organizer, Adrian Locke. Location, Glass Conference Room B. Time, 11:15 to 11:45. He hadn't spoken to me directly. No knock on my desk, no "let's sync," just a meeting invite dropped into my schedule like a commandment from above. I dragged the folder Lena had given me closer. I still hadn't read everything. Part of me didn't want to. But the other part, the one that had survived 6 years and 3 reorganizations, knew I needed to see the whole picture before I sat down across from him. The next email in the stack was to a name I didn't recognize. To marcus.chang@stratagemconsulting.com. Subject, New Playground. Day 3 at the new place. There's a PM here who thinks she runs Helix. Talented enough, but predictable. I'll gut her influence by looping myself directly to leadership. Once the Q3 numbers hit, they'll think the win was mine from the start. Women like her make it easy. They do the work, I do the story. My stomach turned, a slow, deliberate knot. Another thread was between him and HR, written the week before he started. I see potential to streamline the strategy group. My early impression is that some senior PMs are over-leveled. With time, I can help you identify redundancies. I didn't have to guess who sat at the top of his redundant list. The last email in the pile was what shifted everything from insult to danger. To cfo.office@company.com. Subject, Helix Risk plus My Plan. Helix is currently undermanaged. I've taken the initiative to reframe our proposal and redirect client expectations toward a more profitable scope. I'll lead Friday's touchpoint to realign them. Maya can support with details as needed. She's still attached to the original model and might resist, but I'll handle it. Attached were slides. My slides. Titles changed, logos rearranged, but the backbone was unmistakable. He'd taken my months of work, swapped a few numbers to make short-term margins look prettier, and labeled it mismanaged. And he was promising to handle me. A knock on the project room's open door pulled me back. Jessa leaned in, eyes wary. "He's in the conference room," she said, "waiting for you." I slid the emails back into the folder, aligning the edges until they were perfectly straight. My heartbeat was steady now, each thud measured. "Okay," I said. As I walked across the floor, I could feel eyes tracking me, some hopeful, some anxious. Adrian glanced up as I approached, giving me that same easy, performative smile he'd used when he first introduced himself to the team. "Maya," he said, standing just enough to appear polite, not enough to be respectful. "Let's make sure we're aligned before Friday, yeah?" Aligned. I thought of the emails, of his promises, of the line, "Women like her make it easy." I took my seat across from him, placed my notebook on the table, and set the folder down beside it, my fingers resting lightly on the cardboard. "Yes," I said calmly. "Let's." Adrian talked for 20 minutes without breathing. Or maybe he just talked in a way that felt breathless, slick sentences, loosened tie, fingers drumming the table with an impatience designed to remind me of my place in his new hierarchy. On the screen behind him, the Helix deck he'd reframed flickered with wrong numbers, wrong language, wrong assumptions. He spoke with the confidence of someone who believed that confidence itself was a substitute for competence. "And then we position the rollout as a strategic pivot," he said, clicking to a slide that made my chest tighten. "You'll handle the technical clarifications. I'll manage the big picture narrative. It's what I'm best at." I had spent 6 months building the Helix rollout. He'd spent 6 minutes butchering it. Still, I said nothing. He misread my silence as agreement, or submission. Hard to tell with men like him. They tended to confuse the two. "You're unusually quiet today, Maya," he said, leaning back. "Not upset about earlier, I hope? I joke around, builds camaraderie." My jaw didn't move. "I'm fine." "Good," he said, smiling, "because I need you sharp. Friday's call is high stakes, and leadership already sees me as the face of this project." That sentence, "the face of this project," landed differently. Not sharp, not painful, more like a cold realization settling under my skin. He truly believed it. He thought he could cut my work into pieces, glue his name on top, and walk into a boardroom wearing my achievements like a tailored suit. Maybe he still believed I hadn't seen the emails. He clicked to another slide, one that projected a revenue model the client had already rejected last quarter. I watched him stumble through details, improvising wildly. The numbers spiraled into contradictions so obvious that even he hesitated for a moment, eyes darting to the screen as if it had betrayed him. "Wait, hang on. These projections..." He cleared his throat. "We, might adjust them before Friday." "We will," I said evenly. "Those are outdated." He waved a hand. "The details don't matter. They just want confidence." I realized then, with a clarity so sudden it rooted me to my chair, he doesn't understand any of it. Not the client, not the product, not the risks. He's gambling with a deal the company depends on. And if it collapsed, the blame would land on the person standing closest to the foundation. Me. My fingers curled slightly on the table. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. This wasn't even about his emails. This was about the integrity of my work, my reputation, my team's future. He kept talking, oblivious to the shift happening a few feet away. "Once we align," he said, "I'll take over the leadership communication. You'll echo my points. Consistency matters. And if the CEO has questions, let me field them. I know how to read a room." I did read the room, and I finally saw him clearly. A man betting on charisma he didn't have. A strategist who couldn't strategize. A leader who didn't know how to lead. But most importantly, a man building his entire ascent on work he couldn't execute. That was the moment the knot inside me loosened, not with relief, but with decision. I wasn't going to outshout him. I wasn't going to plead or confront or warn. I was going to let him keep talking. Let him keep believing. Let him present outdated models, misaligned metrics, and a fantasy narrative he hadn't prepared to defend. And when leadership turned to me for clarity, as they always did, truth would do the work for me. He finally paused, misinterpreting my quiet for attentiveness. "Any concerns?" he asked lightly, as though inviting me into his kingdom. I closed my notebook slowly, the sound crisp in the quiet room. "No concerns," I said, meeting his eyes. "Not yet." He smiled, pleased with the answer he had told himself to expect. But inside, something had shifted. I was done absorbing, done excusing, done waiting for the storm to pass. I wasn't the one in danger anymore. He was. By Wednesday morning, the humiliation was old news to everyone except the person who delivered it. Adrian strutted through the office with the swagger of a man who believed he had already won. His confidence wasn't just loud, it was sloppy, reckless, the kind of overconfidence that made people dangerous without realizing they were becoming their own undoing. I didn't flinch when he passed my desk. I didn't look up when he made some throwaway comment about team players. If anything, I softened my voice, kept my movements measured, let him believe the narrative he'd already written about me. Compliant, predictable, quietly grateful for scraps of approval. It worked. He left me alone. That gave me room to move. The first step was small enough to seem harmless. I sent a message to the CEO's assistant, requesting a brief Helix status check-in, 10 minutes max, preferably this week. The reply came 5 minutes later. "Thursday morning, 9 o'clock, CEO will join." I didn't tell Adrian. I didn't need him there. My update would be quiet, factual, and documented. Everything his weren't. Next, I drafted a short note to the Helix client team. To prevent confusion ahead of Friday's call, please direct all questions to me directly, updating materials shortly. No accusations, no drama, just clarity. By noon, 4 different client leads had replied, "Thanks, Maya. We prefer working through you anyway." I archived every message. My team worked with a focus I hadn't seen in months. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't ask what the plan was. They simply started gathering truth like it was precious metal. Lena built a clean revision history of the deck. Every change I had made, every original timeline, every signed-off decision. She organized it so neatly that even someone unfamiliar with the project could see the shape of Adrian's interference. Mateo cross-checked internal approvals and compiled a list of everything Adrian had claimed to have completed. Most of the tasks were either mine or still pending. Arun recovered deleted messages that connected the dots too cleanly for coincidence. There was no malice in his face as he worked, just the quiet, methodical loyalty of someone who believed in the person he was defending. They brought updates to me throughout the day, timelines, proof, receipts. I thanked them with a nod, kept my voice low, stayed centered. I couldn't afford visible anger. Anger gives the opposition edges to grip onto. Silence gives them nothing. At 4 p.m., I passed Adrian's glass office on my way to the printer. He was pacing behind the desk, recounting some exaggerated version of his accomplishments on a call. His reflection in the glass caught mine, but he didn't actually see me. Men who believed in their invincibility rarely saw the people holding the ground beneath them steady. Later, Jessa slipped into my workspace and set a USB drive on my keyboard. "What's this?" I asked. "The final piece," she said. "His calendar logs. They prove he never attended the prep meetings he claimed to lead." She hesitated, then added quietly, "You know, you don't have to protect him. Not in the meeting. Not anymore." I looked at the drive, then at her. "I'm not protecting him," I said. "I'm preparing the room." Something flickered in her expression. Relief, maybe, or recognition. She nodded and slipped away. By evening, the office had emptied. The hum of computers dimmed one by one until only the pale glow of my monitor remained. I opened the folder of evidence, email, logs, drafts, approvals, and arranged them into a single narrative, one clean enough to be undeniable and calm enough to be lethal. Then I closed everything, packed my bag, and turned off my screen. As I walked toward the elevator, I saw Adrian at the far end of the hall, laughing loudly with someone from the finance team, his voice echoing off the glass walls. He had no idea. Not about the evidence, not about the quiet meeting scheduled with the CEO, not about how thoroughly he'd exposed himself with every arrogant assumption. Tomorrow, the leverage would surface. Friday, the truth would land. And I wouldn't have to raise my voice once. Silence was already doing the work. Friday arrived with that particular kind of stillness offices get before something important happens. Voices lowered, footsteps softer, a collective inhale waiting for release. The quarterly strategy review wasn't until 10 a.m., but by 8:30, people were already straightening desks, tightening ties, pretending not to be nervous. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. I was precise. My team gave me quiet nods as I walked in. They didn't hover, didn't swarm, didn't ask if I was ready. They simply settled into their roles, steady, loyal, unspoken anchors. Adrian, on the other hand, buzzed with theatrical confidence. He swept into the office holding a branded leather folder and a cup of coffee someone else had fetched for him. His smile was big, bright, blindingly artificial. "Big day," he said, pausing at my desk. "Don't worry, I'll handle the lion's share. Just back me up with the details." I looked up at him, calm. Of course. He mistook it for deference, and that was the last time he would ever misread me. When we entered the executive conference room, leadership was already gathering. Directors from operations, finance, HR, and the CEO herself, seated at the head of the long, polished table. The room buzzed with low conversation until Adrian stepped forward, with his natural gift for commanding a room he didn't deserve. "Thank you all for joining," he said. "I'll be presenting our refreshed Helix strategy. You'll see substantial improvements." He nodded to the AV tech, and his deck appeared on the screen. Wrong numbers, outdated projections, incorrect risk summaries. He didn't even notice his own undoing lingering in plain sight. I watched the CEO's brow furrow as he spoke. That was my first confirmation. She sensed the rot. Adrian clicked to the third slide. "As you can see, the revised model increases profitability significantly." The CFO leaned forward. "These numbers aren't consistent with what we signed off on." "Well," Adrian said breezily, "the previous model was a bit muddled. I took the liberty of—" I didn't have to say anything. He was unraveling himself. The CEO turned to me. "Maya, does this reflect the current client direction?" Adrian jumped in. "She's been buried in the weeds. She might not have the latest high-level view." I folded my hands neatly. "Actually," I said, "if I may clarify." The CEO nodded. I rose slowly, walked to the screen, and tapped the corner of the slide. These projections were submitted last quarter and rejected. The client pivoted. The current model is here. I clicked my version of the deck, the accurate one. The room shifted as though the floor had tilted 2 degrees. The numbers were clean, realistic, documented. Adrian blinked hard. "Where? How did—" I kept my voice even. "This is the model we've spent 6 months refining. It reflects client expectations and confirmed deliverables." "And this," the CFO added, gesturing at Adrian's slide, "is—" "What, exactly?" Adrian straightened his posture, fluster creeping into his voice. I updated them for clarity. That's interesting, I said, because you didn't attend the planning meetings where those updates were approved, or the risk reviews, or the client alignment calls. Several executives exchanged quick glances. His throat bobbed. I clicked again, and there it was, his emails. Projected on a 15-foot screen, no commentary, no dramatics, just their exact language. Women like her make it easy. She'll trip over the rope I give her. Leadership already sees me as the face of the project. The room went still. The HR director leaned back slowly, the movement controlled but unmistakably final. Adrian's face drained of color. This is taken out of context. The CEO's voice was sharp, surgical. Do you want to explain the context in which you described a senior project manager as dead weight while using her work to advance yourself? He opened and closed his mouth soundlessly. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't shift. Just stood there, steady as bedrock. The silence wrapped around him like a verdict. Adrian, the HR director said carefully, we need to speak outside. Now. He looked at me then, not with arrogance, not with charm, not with superiority, but with the stunned helplessness of a man who has just realized he never understood the rules of the game. He followed HR out of the room, shoulders sagging, his once confident steps dissolving into quiet defeat. The door shut behind him. The CEO exhaled, slow and controlled. Maya, she said, thank you for the clarity. I nodded. Of course. And for the first time all week, the tension in the room lifted, just slightly, just enough to feel the shift of power settling where it always should have been, right back into my hands. The moment Adrian left the room with HR, the air shifted, not dramatically, not with cheers or whispers, but with that slow, inevitable gravity that follows a collapse everyone sensed coming, but no one dared name aloud. The executives refocused on the agenda, though their eyes flickered toward the door more than the screen. I returned to my seat, calm, composed, my pulse steady in a way that surprised even me. Months of work had built to this moment. But the victory didn't feel explosive. It felt quiet, clean, like a window finally opening in a room that had been suffocating for weeks. The CEO closed her folder. Let's take a 10-minute break, she said softly, her gaze lingering on me with something unspoken. Respect, maybe? Or recognition? People rose from their chairs, murmuring to one another in low, careful tones. No one approached me directly, but I could feel the shift. The small nods, the avoided eye contact from those who had aligned with Adrian too quickly. The subtle recalibration of loyalty happening in real time. I didn't bask in it. I didn't need to. I simply stepped into the hallway for air. The corridor outside the conference room was bright with morning light, reflecting off the glass walls. At the far end, I saw Adrian standing near the HR office, shoulders tense, hair slightly disheveled. He kept gesturing with one hand, but his movements were jerky now, clumsy, nothing like the controlled swagger he'd entered the company with. He spotted me, and in that flicker of a second, I watched recognition dawn. Not anger, not spite, recognition. He understood that I hadn't sabotaged him. He had sabotaged himself. He opened his mouth, maybe to defend himself, maybe to plead, maybe to redirect blame. Men like him rarely distinguished between those impulses. But HR stepped out, motioning him toward their office. He went inside without another word. The door shut softly, the kind of quiet closure that feels more final than a slam. Back in the conference room, the CEO called the review back to order, though the energy had settled into something steadier, more grounded. We finished the necessary updates, delegated action items, confirmed next steps. Everything proceeded with sharp professionalism. Only once the meeting ended did the CEO address me directly. "Maya," she said, gathering her notes, "walk with me." We stepped into the hallway. She didn't speak immediately, and I didn't fill the space with explanations or apologies. Silence, I'd learned, often told leaders more about a person's strength than speeches ever could. Finally, she said, "I appreciate how you handled this." I nodded. I focused on accuracy. "That's exactly why this company trusts you," she replied. Then, after a beat, "Helix needs stability, not ego. I want you leading the next phase, directly." A quiet exhale left my lungs. Of course. She offered a small, approving smile and continued down the hall, leaving me in the filtered light of the glass corridor. Around noon, the news reached the floor. A message from HR. Effective immediately, Adrian Locke is no longer with the company. No details, no elaboration, no fanfare. The office reacted with its own unspoken choreography. Side glances, raised brows, a few murmured wows carried on the hum of overhead lights. But no one seemed surprised. My team didn't celebrate. They didn't need to. They simply looked at me with the kind of quiet satisfaction that comes from watching justice unfold. Not loudly, not violently, but inevitably. Lena approached my desk. "You okay?" I nodded. Yes, finally. She placed a small stack of papers beside me. Her way of saying, "We're moving forward now." "Then we should prep for Monday. Helix wants updates." I smiled, small but real. Let's get started. At 4:10 p.m., as I packed my bag, I saw the last of Adrian. Security led him through the glass lobby, his steps slow, his face slack with disbelief. He carried a single cardboard box, whatever he'd been allowed to keep. No entourage, no bravado. Just a man walking out of a building he thought he'd control. He didn't look back. He didn't see me standing by the railing of the mezzanine. But I watched him. Not out of triumph or spite, out of closure. Out of the simple, undeniable fact that he had written his own ending long before I revealed it. And as the doors shut behind him, sealing the final moment of his tenure, I let the silence settle again. Not cold, not vengeful, but steady. The storm had passed, and I was still standing. The following Monday, the office felt lighter. Not dramatically, no balloons, no shouting, no whispered legends retold at the coffee machine. Just a subtle recalibration in the way people moved through the halls, the way conversations no longer paused when certain footsteps approached. Adrian's name faded faster than I expected. People who had gravitated to him early on now gravitated back to their work, their teams, their habits. The artificial gravity he'd tried to impose on the floor had evaporated in a weekend. My calendar, on the other hand, had filled. Helix, leadership check-in. Strategy group, restructure discussion. CEO 1-1. At 9:05 a.m., an all-company email went out. Subject, Interim Department Leadership. From CEO. Short, precise, unemotional. Effective immediately, Maya Kovars will oversee strategy as interim head while we evaluate long-term structural options. Please route all strategic decision-making through her office. No praise, no narrative, just authority. I read it twice, then closed the window. My hands didn't shake. They had done enough shaking. Within minutes, people began stopping by my desk, not to congratulate exactly, but to anchor themselves to the new reality. "Congrats, Maya." "About time." Helix is in good hands. Lena appeared last, leaning against the edge of my desk, arms folded, eyes softer than usual. "How does it feel?" she asked. I thought about it. "Honest," I said. She let out a breath she might have been holding all last week. "You know he told me you'd adjust once he showed you how things really worked." A small, humorless smile touched my lips. He wasn't entirely wrong. I did adjust. She chuckled. Just not in his favor. We moved on to planning. There were client updates to send, internal expectations to reset, a department to stabilize. The work didn't pause to celebrate my sense of justice. It simply waited to see who would carry it well. That, more than anything, grounded me. Later that day, I found myself alone in the same small project room where my team had first shown me the emails. The table was cleared now, the walls bare except for an old roadmap pinned near the whiteboard. I sat in the same chair, let the echo of that morning replay. "Fetch me coffee, darling. You'll be good for something." He had wanted me small, contained, convenient. What he never understood was that restraint is not weakness, it's stored power. The emails, the evidence, the preparation, they hadn't been weapons. They were simply a mirror. I had held it up. He had done the rest. I stood, switched off the light, and stepped back into the hum of the floor. People glanced up as I passed, not to assess me, not to measure my reaction, but to acknowledge. A nod, a shared understanding, a quiet alignment that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Respect, I realized, isn't something you demand in a meeting or carve into a title. It's something that accrues, slowly, in the way you choose not to break when someone tries to bend you. Adrian's story was over. Mine had just changed shape. As I walked toward my new office, his old one, glass walls and all, I felt no urge to gloat, no satisfaction in the symmetry of the space. I simply opened the door, set my bag down, and looked out over the floor he'd tried to rule by humiliation. The same people were here, the same desks, the same hum of fluorescent lights. The only difference was where the gravity now settled. Not in his voice, not in his charm. In the quiet certainty that I would never again fetch coffee for a man who mistook my composure for surrender. Respect had remembered me.